Welcome to Consumer Math, Lesson 2-5, Chapter 7, Bankruptcy. This was originally going to be one lesson on just bankruptcy, and then I realized that it's too big of a topic. All right, today's date is Monday, October 26, 2020. I'd like to type as much as possible because it is faster for me and I get to talk more. Our objective today, learn how to get rid of all of your debt. All right, so, and my notes are all over the place, so I'm gonna reorganize on the fly here. Hopefully this goes okay. The first question, what is bankruptcy? What is bankruptcy? I think that's a good question to lead us off with. Bankruptcy is, I'll move this text once I start typing it. But it is a legal proceeding where an individual, and I'll add on to this out loud, but you don't need to write this down. It's an individual or individuals, maybe you and your wife, or you and your spouse, I don't know. Or you could have it as a business. I believe Chapter 7 bankruptcy is also for your personal business as well. So it's a legal proceeding. So this is just something that you do at the court where your pair, whatever, where did I go in my notes? Make a formal request that you cannot pay your debts. It's like, help me out. I need a fresh start. I can't pay these things. They cost too much. And sure, let's put that right there. Notice that I wrote it's a request, which means you can't just be like, nah, I'm not paying this, I'm done. You have to get it approved. So the next question that I have, which is super important, what types of debt can be, I need to be very technical in my wording here. It's not forgiven, it's not waived. What types of debt can be discharged? That's the word that they use, that we will use as well. And we'll do two columns here. Can be discharged, and the second column is cannot. And I'll do that maybe cannot be discharged. So things that you're like, hey, I don't want to pay this anymore, that can be forgiven, are the following. Credit cards. It's mainly credit cards. You can have other things too, depending on what you have. But I'm trying to think, I didn't actually write this down, so I'm trying to look through my notes. Oh, huge one, medical fees. That's the main reason that people file for bankruptcy, which means I must have written that down somewhere else. Where are the, oh yeah. Yep, I like snap to that. I totally agree. And in general, poor financial choices. That's not a can be discharged. So financial choices, I think it mainly is those two. I'm trying to think of anything else. Maybe I'll have to Google this and add to this list later. But I know the thing that cannot be discharged pretty well because I did write that down. Child support. So, I mean, most of you probably know what that is, but like if you have your parents are just divorced and maybe the mom has custody, the dad has to pay the mom an alimony every week, every month, or whatever, saying, here's some money for our child. Student loans. And with each of these, there's an asterisk. like, for example, for student loans, they can be discharged, but you have to prove undue hardship, which is kind of hard. Undue hardship is like, I have $200,000 of student loans and I don't have a job. Okay, that's pretty hard. You can maybe be forgiven. What's something else? Income tax. So if you are being taxed by the IRS and they say you owe us $10,000, you can't file for bankruptcy, the IRS is still coming after you. Those are kind of the big ones. So, and I guess we can add to this list over here. Now that I'm thinking about it, you don't want these things to be discharged, but you can have them discharged, which is car payments and mortgage, which is kind of silly, like, because then you're homeless. So, but you can have them discharged, I guess. So if you want to get rid of your credit card debt, if you want to get rid of your medical fees, which is the most common, I'll maybe circle that one. That is the most common reason that people file for bankruptcy. I broke my leg and I didn't have any insurance, and I have $200,000 worth of fees, which in a different country, literally any other country, well, maybe not any, but like especially Canada and Europe, they probably wouldn't have even charged you that much at all. All right, so I think that's a good question. What types of debt can be discharged? And what's another good question? Let's do a little bit of history here. This is not really a question. Let's just title this history. The history of bankruptcy. It's relatively new. So way back in the olden ages, you had something called debt bondage. And unfortunately, debt bondage is very much a thing that still happens today. But let's write it down. Debt bondage. You used to have this thing called debt bondage, which is a fancy way of saying, hey, you owe me money and you don't have the ability to pay it back. So I will provide you the ability to pay it back by working for me. I can force you to do hard labor for my neighbor. I can force you to be my gardener. Like, typically it's kind of really bad things that you don't want to be doing. Like, I'm going to put you out in the fields and you're going to be, I don't know, plowing fields or something like hard labor. That's typically debt bondage. And it has existed for a long time. It still officially exists today in South Asia and the sub-Saharan Africa. I'm sure probably a few other places where, yeah, the general idea here, let's do some bullet points. The general idea, that's not a good bullet point. I might have to handwrite these. Let's go to handwriting. The general idea is you, and sometimes your family too. I say that laughingly, but it's really sad. And sometimes family. Work for your creditor. Creditor. To pay off debt. Obviously, you can go into debt. Like, that's the whole purpose of a bank, right? The bank's like, oh, I'll loan you some money, you buy a house, and then as long as you're making regular payments, you're not going to go into debt bondage. Debt bondage is specifically when you can't pay back. This happens when you can't pay it, when you can't pay it back. When you can't pay back loan. Pay back loan. So, a not so fun fact, according to the UN, there are in the world roughly 8 million people that are in this cycle of debt bondage. And when I say cycle, you don't like it's slavery. It's modern day slavery. You typically can't get out of it. Why? Because they're like, oh, well, you need to pay off this debt of like $10, but while you're here staying in my house, you also need to pay me room and board. Oh, that food, that cheeseburger, it doesn't cost you $2. It costs you $20. There's a cycle of saying, like, you can't get out of debt bondage. You are a modern day slave. So we'll write that down too. It's sad, but according to the UN, there's about 8 million, probably more, I would guess. I don't know what metrics they use. 8 million people that are trapped, and that's kind of the key word, trapped in debt bondage. Debt bondage. Worldwide. So this has existed for a long time, and it still exists. There's another thing that exists. I'm going to switch back to typing here, and that is called debtor's prison. Debtor's, maybe a plural, debtor's prison, like that. Whenever I hear the word debtor's prison, what I think back to is like Victorian England. Let me put that here too. Victorian England. I can't spell. There's a T that I'm looking for. Victorian England, where instead of forcing you to do labor, they're just like, nah, we're just gonna lock you up in a cell underneath our house or something, and maybe our castle. I don't know. We're just gonna lock you up, and if you have family or friends that can pay you off, then you're good. We'll let you out if they can pay you off. Otherwise, you're just gonna die in that cell. So obviously, if you're the person, if you are the creditor, you probably want them to be able to pay back that loan. You maybe only want to do a death or something, a prison, to like show people, to inspire fear so they actually pay back their loans. I don't know. But that is another thing that happened. Yeah, there's your history. Now we have bankruptcy, which is a lot better than either of those two options. I think we can all nod our heads. It is a legal way to say, hey, I don't want to pay for things. Give me a fresh start. So the next question that I have, what are the types of bankruptcy? Let's type this down here. What are the types of bankruptcy? Can't spell ruptcy. There you go. There are 6 types of bankruptcy. And it's hard to stay cheerful when I'm talking about something that's so unfun. And the way that we have defined them in the United States, at least, I know that, especially I'm looking like on area who are more worldwide than I will ever be, unfortunately, is because we just base it off of the US bankruptcy codes. So if you open up this giant book / document, you will find many different chapters in that book, and each, not every single chapter refers to a type of bankruptcy, but we'll say over here, there's 6 types, and they're based on chapters in a book that's called the US Bankruptcy Code. US Bankruptcy Code. What are those chapters, by the way? We can just list all the numbers. We have chapter 7, we have chapter 9, we have chapter 11, we have chapter 12, chapter 13, and chapter 15. You'll notice that I skipped 1 through 6 and a bunch of other ones because I don't know. I didn't actually research that far. I researched way too much. I'm just going to gloss over this and say, hey, the ones that you guys all need to know is our title, chapter 7 and chapter 13. So let's circle 7 and 13. Those are the 2 that apply to you guys. I think, I'm trying to remember, it's either chapter 9 or 11. That's like, what happens if your state of California goes bankrupt? What do you do in that case? And it's maybe useful to know if you're going to work for the state. But for you guys individually, let's focus on the ones that actually matter to us. Obviously, all of today's lesson is chapter 7, and then tomorrow's lesson will be chapter 13, bankruptcy. In essence, chapter 7 is, I'm going to laugh at how I abbreviate this. I'm super poor. Super poor. And chapter 13 is I'm kind of poor. More specifically, if you cannot pay even a portion of your debts, then you're going to file for chapter 7 bankruptcy. And if you can pay for just a slight portion of your debts, but definitely not all of them, then you file for chapter 13 bankruptcy. So you need to, and there is a way, there's like a guide online. You can search like, do I file for chapter 7 or 13 bankruptcy? And they'll walk through and be like, how much money you got? What are your loans? How much are you paying off each month? And they'll walk you through and be like, okay, you should definitely file for chapter 7 bankruptcy. I've been talking for a lot. Questions up to this point? I know we're getting kind of nitty gritty and it's not super entertaining, but it is important information to know. The next question that is kind of the bread and butter of today's lesson is, how does it work? How does filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy work? Okay. So, first I'll put the official statement up here. You file when, and I'll put in quotes, you cannot pay for even a portion of the debts. And when I say the debts, you need to be thinking of the credit card debts, of the medical bills, all the things that can be waived. If you can't pay for your income tax, I don't even know what you're supposed to do. You're just kind of stuck. Hopefully you're not in that dire of a position where you...
How much of the, like how much money do you have to count as a portion of the debt? You count $100 of the debt or $1,000 of the debt?
Yeah, and the way that you define that is kind of hard. So let me answer that by giving you the official test that you'd Google online. To know what this word portion means, portion, and whether you should file for 7 or 13, or if you can't even file, you need to take what's called the bankruptcy means test. So if you want to know what that means in terms of, is it $1,000? Is it 5%? What is it based off of? If you want to know what that means, take and it's called the bankruptcy means test. Bankruptcy means test. I should pause right now and talk about how bad this is. So have you guys ever heard of the Holmes Ray? My wife teases me all the time that I don't know how to pronounce things. Maybe I should look it up. YouTube, how to pronounce Holmes Rahe. I'm gonna say Rahe. Anyone else want to take a guess at it? This person has 6.4 thousand. Maybe they'll pronounce it.
Voucher for a treat, because I can't believe I even found this paper. I took this class, and this was real helpful. I took it at Faith Seminary College.
Okay, where'd you?
So
I probably
I did my master's in arts and counseling, Christian counseling. So this was real informative to me, and I tried to find it online, but I couldn't. So I'm glad I got it up here. I don't know, maybe I just looked up the wrong research or something. But this is the social adjustment rating.
Dang it, they're not gonna say it. Okay, I'm just gonna wing it. It's called the Holmes Rahe Life Stress Inventory, I think. And there's one for high schoolers too, if you want to check it out. Can we go on this brief fun aside, so you don't have to do any notes? Yeah. Let's go Holmes Rahe Life, stress inventory. There's the official stress.org one, and then there's the Wikipedia one, which actually has the cooler one. That has the high schooler one too. So it's basically, hey, how stressful is your life? Let me zoom in here. Have you had a death of your spouse? Obviously, you guys aren't married. I hope maybe not. If you've had a divorce, these things are really bad. Those count as 100 points. What do points mean? If you scroll down here to the very bottom, if you have a score of 300 or more, you are probably going to be not doing so good physically and mentally. You always think, oh, stress is mental. Like if it's bad enough, it turns into a physical problem. Like, oh, you now have a tumor. That is a physical problem. You now need a medical operation to get that taken out of because you have too much stress in your life. A score of 150 to 299, you have a 30% reduced by 30% from the above risk, and less than 150, you have a slight risk of illness. Yeah, but there's all these things, and they're kind of fun, not fun to read about. Like the beginning or end of school is you add 26. And by the way, all these points you have to do it within the last 365 days. So if you've had a pregnancy, but it was like 10 years ago, obviously it's probably not making you that stressful. The pregnancy, maybe the having the kid part is, but not the pregnancy anymore. But then there's the non-adults one, which is kind of cool. Well, I'm trying to stay positive about these because these are really sad, but yeah, these are all the points. So maybe I can print this out for you guys one day and you can inventory yourselves. But Death of a parent is 100 points. Again, if you're 300 or more, you're not doing good at all. You got married, unplanned pregnancy, abortion, divorce of parents, acquiring visible deformity, fathering a child, jail sentence, parents are separated, death of brother or sister, change in acceptance by peers. I'm guessing that has to do with like maybe coming out of the closet type of thing, or a lot of other things too. Unplanned pregnancy of sister, discovering of being adopted, marriage with your parents, death of a close friend, having visible deformity, illness, failing. Look at that. If you get an F in the class, it's 56 points. Not making an extracurricular activity, hospitalization of a parent, if you're jailed, breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend is 53 points. That's, what does that mean? So 53 on that means a 53 up here. What's a 53? That's almost the death of a close family member. It's breaking up for a kid is more stressful than a marriage. That's kind of crazy. Well, and it's true though, because everyone has their own stress index, right? Maybe you're like much harder because you've encountered a lot of stress in your life, but typically children have encountered less stress typically than adults. So those scores actually mean something, right? Beginning to date, suspension from school, drugs, birth of a sister. Yeah, I'll go through these probably more in depth at a later date, and we'll actually calculate our scores. But yeah, the point of me bringing this up is bankruptcy on here actually isn't on here. It's kind of sad, but it should be. Where should it be? Where's your loss of job? Isn't there a loss of job on here? Dismissal from work, 47. Dismissal from work is not even one of the biggest things, but remember how I said the biggest thing that means that you'll file for bankruptcy are medical expenses or a lost job. Look at where that is. Personal injury, 53, dismissal from work, 47. The way that I've heard online this explained in terms of how stressful it is to do a bankruptcy, to file for bankruptcy, is it's basically filing for divorce. It's that bad. Like, don't do it because I have $6,000 of credit card debt. Like, it's way too much work, and it's way too much of a hassle, and it's painful, and it's not fun at all. Don't do it if you can avoid it. Remember the lesson from Thursday for payday loans? Literally do anything else. Bankruptcy, same lesson. Literally do anything else, which is, I guess, also a catchphrase for divorce. Literally do anything else before you file for divorce too. Anyway, coming back to our actual lesson, getting ready to take some more notes. What do we do? And we're running out of room here. But the first thing that you do, number one, is you are going to have to take government mandated credit counseling. So it's a class, and you have to pay for that class. None of this stuff is free. So I'll write in the word pay and attend. And it's called government mandated credit counseling. Spelling is hard. What does that mean? You go and maybe Google, go to a brochure, and it'll have, these are the places that you can take this class. And typically at that class, what will happen is they will say, hey, sorry, Josie, I want to pick on you. Hey, Josie, I know that you want to file for bankruptcy, but you don't really need to. You could do X, Y, and Z. They'll make Josie do the budgeting tool. You know, the budgeting activity that we did where you keep track of your finances for a whole month? They'll make you do that also in that class. They'll make you do a bunch of things, but the main thing is they'll say, hey, should you file for Chapter 7 or should you file for Chapter 13? That will be in that class. Step number 2. Step number 2. You will, this is the fun part, file your forms. File forms with the court. And those take forever. I briefly glanced at them last night, and there's no TurboTax for filing for bankruptcy. You got to fill them out. That means there maybe will be one day. Maybe there is right now. I just didn't search hard enough, but they take forever and they're difficult. And you're basically trying to prove that you have a lot of loans and you don't have enough money for it. So it's a lot of financial documents. By the way, when you file those forms, guess how much you have to pay? It's not free. None of this stuff is free. You got to pay between $300 and $400 to file those forms. Although if you're in a really, really tough spot, I guess there is a fee waiver, but typically those don't happen. So Sometimes we'll say sometimes there's a fee waiver if you're really, really in a tough spot. But again, every single one of these steps is going to cost you some money. All right, so this is when kind of your magic happens, because you've done the class, which I don't know how long it takes, but let's say it takes a long time. You filed all of those tedious forms, you've paid all these fees, you paid for your classes. We're still not even halfway done, but this is when you finally get a bit of relief. And this is not a step anything. I'm going to put it right in the middle. You get a stay. It's called an STAY, and it's not an acronym. I just put in all caps because it's really important. It means a bunch of different things. So I guess I'm going to interrupt my notes here to bring you this message. What is a stay? So stay is really nice because your creditors can't stop, or they have to stop harassing you. So credit, no more communication with creditors. Typically, if you're in the position where you're probably going to file for bankruptcy, you're probably going to get calls at least 2 times a day per creditor. Like Wells Fargo is calling you, hey, pay us, hey, pay us. If they're being really annoying, they could call you like 20 to 30 times a day per creditor. If you have multiple forms of debt, I have a credit card, I have a doctor's bill, I have 3 different types of bank accounts, I don't know, like 3 different types of credit cards. Every creditor is going to be calling you multiple times a day, and it is hard. I guess you could just not pick up, right? But it's still kind of annoying. So a stay says, hey, don't talk to this person anymore. They're trying to file for bankruptcy. They're not going to annoy you. Kind of important. Next thing is they stop wage garnishment. Stop wage garnishment. So again, this is kind of that word that it's not the exact word that we've used before, but it's that word that basically means, hey, your employer is, or someone is holding back your money that you should be getting into your checking account because you're in debt so much. They're saying, sorry, editor, but I know you're supposed to get paid $1,000 this month. We're going to take $600 away so we can pay your creditors. You can get $400. They'll stop it. When you get your stay, when you filed your forms, they'll say, okay, editor, you get your full $1,000. Don't worry about the creditors. We'll worry about that later. And also really key is it will stop foreclosure / eviction. So if you're about to be kicked out because you are in such a bad spot, this will say, hey, like let him stay there until you're done. By the way, there's an important question that I forgot to ask at the very beginning, which is how long does it take to file for bankruptcy? I should have added that up above. Let's, since I already asked a question, let me ask a different question, then we'll come back to the process. We'll be on step 3 after this. How long does it take to file for bankruptcy? At least for title, or for chapter 7 and chapter 13, it will take a minimum of 9 months. What? 9 months? It might take over a year. And typically it takes a year or more. So I'll say at least 9 months. So after those 9 months, then you will be debt-free in terms of your credit card debt, in terms of your medical fees, hopefully not your car payments and mortgage, because hopefully you'll be able to hold on to those things. You won't be homeless or carless, but you will be debt-free after those 9 months. So stays are super, super important. That's kind of like your goal, like your big checkpoint of like, yes, I'm not being harassed anymore. Yes, I'm seeing some progress being made after filing all of those forms. All right, we're on to step number 3 now. So we're coming back here to the, I'll title this, back to the process. Back to the process. We're on step number 3 now. So step number 3. The court will assign a trustee to you. So you get a trustee. So trustee from the court. It's kind of like a lawyer. It's like a person that's in charge of your case. I love these questions, by the way. Yeah, so they are going to be the ones that are going to start assessing all of your assets. By the way, it's kind of important for this step 3. Your assets are no longer yours in this step. All of your assets are now part of the bankruptcy property, part of the bankruptcy property. which means, hey, like you had that really nice piece of art in your room that you bought for like $10,000. Yeah, that's not yours anymore. As soon as you get that trustee, they take control of your assets. I'm kind of not 100% clear on, does that asset include your car or not? Like those kind of critical information. Can they take Jose's shoes from him? Those are assets. I don't think they can. There's a part that I'll get to in a sec where I talk about what are exempt and non-exempt forms of assets that for liquidation, and most things that you would think of that are needed to by you to live, they're not going to liquidate. So I assume your shoes, Jose, your car, Eder, those are not going to be taken away from you yet, at least.
What about like skis and
Skis, those are gone. Yeah. Anything for fun, those are gone. Yeah. All right, so you get your trustee. They're going to be assessing your court. They'll be helping you. By the way, this all costs money. Like it's basically a lawyer. So how much does a trustee cost? It costs, I wrote it down somewhere. Where did I write it down? Actually, the trustee, I think, is just a fee. You typically will want a bankruptcy lawyer, but I'll talk about that tomorrow because you typically won't have a bankruptcy lawyer with Chapter 7 because Chapter 7 is a little bit easier. Chapter 13 is a lot more confusing, and you will almost always need a bankruptcy lawyer, which will cost between $200 if it's just a, hey, this is what you should do, bye, and up to $6,000 if it's like, hey, come to court with me and help me. That's the $6,000 end. Typically, it's going to be $1,000 or $2,000. Step number 4. You finally get to, it's not really a 1v1, but it's like a 1vx. You get a fight with your creditors at the court. So I'm going to call it a meet because it's a fancier word of saying you're going to fight. You're going to meet at the court with your creditors. And they will eventually make a decision. They'll say, hey, yeah, we'll waive those fees. Or no, sorry, you got to pay those fees. So by the way, when you meet at the court, that might happen multiple times. They might say, there's not enough information. We'll revisit this in a month or something, which is the reason that I say at least 9 months. It could take longer. If this is kind of the part that takes the longest, that you have no control over. You have control over how fast you can do your paperwork in step number 2. You don't have control over how often the court has availability to meet with you. So you might have, in a really bad case, like 4 meetings with a case that are a month apart from each other. That's 4 months of waiting for the court to decide whether or not you get waived. But in that whole entire time, the stay is active. You're still not getting harassed. You still are getting your full wages. You have not been kicked out of your place to live. So underneath step 4, not step 5, but within that step 4, you'll come to a decision. A decision will eventually be made. One way or the other. They will say, yep, you got it. We'll waive all of your medical fees. We'll waive all of your credit card fees. We'll waive all of those fees, which is pretty cool, right? Like you're now debt free. You went through all this process and you're finally free. I mean, there's still a step 5 and is there step 6? Yeah, and step 7. Wow, I forgot all about all those steps. But you've got that relief. Like, whew, it's gonna happen. So I will say underneath here as well, if they decline you, or if denied, you can still file for Chapter 13. You can still file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is not as nice, right? You remember Chapter 7 bankruptcy is when they waive everything. Chapter 13 bankruptcy is where they're like, I'll give you the TLDR. They're like, hey, make payments for 5 years and then we'll waive everything. But if you can't make those payments every single month for 5 years, then you've still got to pay them because you messed up. Yep, that's step 4. Moving on, next step. We got a lot of steps. Step number 5. This is the heart-wrenching part. This is the emotionally hard part. Liquidation of assets. Whenever you see the word liquidation, that means to sell. It is a fancy word for saying you have converted your desk into money. You have converted your chair into money. You have converted your car into money. Liquidation, and it's usually used a lot of the times with our upcoming unit, which is investment. If you have some form of investment, like I have $1,000 invested into Tesla or something. If you liquidate that, that means you've converted your investment into money. And how fast that happens is a topic for later, but you're going to liquidate your assets, and it's not you typically. It's going to be this person up here, your trustee. The trustee is the one that's now in charge of all of your assets. They are going to be the ones that are saying, hey, you're going to sell all of that art. You're going to sell, oh, you have that $20,000 car. It's kind of cheap. No, we're going to sell that. We're going to give you a $5,000 beater car. They're going to liquidate as many assets as they can. And now you're probably worried like, well, shoot, what can they liquidate and what can they not liquidate? And that's what I want to talk about. So 2 columns. We'll talk about exempt assets and non-exempt. Non-exempt assets. Exempt, can't spell, assets. A better way of saying that is, if you don't like the word exempt, things they can't take away. Can't take away. These are the things that are going to be sold. So what are your exempt assets? What can they legally not take away from you? And everything has an asterisk. Like, that's why it took so long to take these notes last night, because they can sometimes. Typically, exempt assets are your house. If you have a house, they're not going to liquidate your house and make you homeless. That's like just cruel, right? Like, what was the point of doing this if I'm going back all the way to square zero? I want to have a fresh start, but I still want my house and I still want my car to go to my job so that I can eventually make a living. And that brings me to the second one, car. And there's a giant asterisk here, which I just told you guys, no, they'll sell your car if it's expensive. If you already have your used $5,000 Subaru, you're keeping that, right, Anna? But if you have, I don't know, Gunner, who's here, if you have your $1 million car, they're gonna sell your $1 million or $1 billion. How much was your car, Gunner?
Would I sell it?
How much was the car that you tried to get last week?
20 million. Yeah, 20 million.
They're gonna sell your $20 million car, and they're gonna give you a $5,000 car. So giant asterisk on that one. But those are usually the 2 things that are exempt. Things that are not exempt, that they're definitely gonna be selling. Clothes. Oh, yeah, sorry, clothes. They will sell designer clothes and give you a voucher saying, here's $100 to go buy some new clothes. Yeah. If you
It doesn't sound fair at all.
Well, the whole point here is they're giving you a fresh start. You're not going to go in jail. They're not going to put you in prison to die until your friends or family can pay you off. They're not going to make you do hard labor until you can pay it off. They're just saying, hey, we're going to take away as much as we can without totally messing you up, and we're going to take away everything else. Here are the things that they'll take away, and it's basically everything else. I'll write down everything else, but I'll give you an example. And this is where the general idea of bankruptcy is. If I had to explain bankruptcy to my son or to a 5-year-old, I would say bankruptcy is when you give away basically everything, but they also take away your debts. That's bankruptcy. And here's everything else. Here are some examples. They'll take away any investments that you have. So if you have any sort of stock market, if you have any shares, they'll take away those. Any sort of investments at all. So if you have investments in land, they'll typically take that away too. Like, I have my house over here, but I bought land all the way in that different state. They'll take that away. They'll take away all other forms of investments. Other things, jewelry, which is kind of sad, right?
What about things you made? Like, what if you made your own jewelry? You like made your own, clothes?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'll just say I don't know. I did ask Mr. Godoy if we could get a lawyer to come visit us one day to have these types of questions. So can you write that down? Because eventually we will have some sort of professional that will come in and tell us yes or no on that one. I'm going to say, as the ignorant teacher that I am about this lesson, they'll probably take it away, because they'll take away a ton of things. They'll take away jewelry, even self-created jewelry, I would guess, artwork. Collectibles, like if you have a stamp collection, a Pokemon card collection, they'll take that away. Stuff like that. And again, the list goes on and on. And wow, we are out of time. This is a long lesson. We haven't even finished chapter 7, bankruptcy. I told you guys it was long. I'll give you the TLDR, but we will finish these notes tomorrow. Go ahead and pencils up. You don't need to, as long as you copy that down, you're done. Where we're heading for this is at the very end. Don't hide your assets. If you think, oh, I'm just going to hide my jewelry that I made in this hole over here. If you get caught, they will come back and say, oh, all of those fees that we waived, nope, you got to pay those back again. They will fine you. They will do bad things to you. Don't hide your assets. It's bad. I mean, hide your assets if you don't get caught, but you might get caught and it will ruin your life. You can no longer file for bankruptcy. Then you need to do another education course, a debtor's education course. And then after 3 to 6 months of the decision and the assets being made, after that, then those debts are lifted and it stays on your record for 10 years. What happens in those 10 years? You basically can't buy anything. Your credit is shot. We talked about FICO credit scores on Thursday. On Wednesday, you basically can't buy anything. You can't apply for a loan. It's hard to do anything. I will finish those notes tomorrow, though.